Hey there, spooky friends, and welcome to another episode of the Scaryish podcast.
Woo!
I'm Robin Grace, this is Adam Diaz,
Hello.
And we're here to talk to you folks about some really long topics, I think. Well, mine is really long for my topics. Usually my topics I write about 3 pages, you know. It's much longer this week, so I'm like, oh, geez.
Yeah, and mine in particular isn't the longest I've ever written, but I did get into the 4 pages and then 1 sentence on the 5th page. So sometimes I go 5 to 7. Those are my really long ones. I think the shortest script I've ever had has been 3 pages. So I think mine will be around middle of the road. This week I'm going to be covering the Banqiao Dam. Robin, what are you going to be covering?
I'm going to be covering the Kitty Genovese murder.
Interesting. I know that you had found something you thought was interesting. Like, I think I'm going to cover this.
Yeah.
And then suddenly it was like, wow, this is really, really long. So it's going to be interesting to hear how that sort of unfolded.
A lot of times, murder is long.
Right on. So I think I'm going to be going first this week. So I guess I will just jump right into it. So this week, I really had an urge to share something with you folks. And I'm not saying something specifically. I think part of the excitement of when we started the show especially was the idea that there were a bunch of things that I had heard of that were relatively obscure that I could then share with other people. Like the idea of I could sit down in front of a microphone and tell you all something I found exciting or genuinely interesting was like the most exciting part of doing the show. And as time has marched on, we've almost been doing this for 4 years. I find myself nowadays more and more nervous that I just won't find a topic at all because we've covered so many things. And I know we have a list of topics in our Google Doc. We have plenty there, you know, but not knowing enough about a topic means you're not sure if they'll pan out to be a good topic, you know? There's going to be a few things on that Google Doc we have that are not going to make a full episode that we're going to have to just delete off the Google Doc and be like, all right, well, this isn't going to work. And you'll just have to move on to the new one. You know what I'm talking about? Mm-hmm. And so they're all kind of like scary because of that. And when you've already learned about a topic, you have this confidence and this passion when you deliver it. And like good research really helps deliver a good topic, even if you knew nothing about it to start. But when you know something about it already, you know, okay, I think this actually will make a good topic. So I started looking through things that I've covered in other areas of my life that I thought are morbid or horrible in some way that would apply. And then it sort of clicked that I know a lot about disasters. About a lot of disasters, in fact. And I have a fascination with natural disasters. So I thought I'm going to go ahead and jump into this because I've covered some stuff before, like plagues or asteroids or volcanoes or supervolcanoes, etc. But this one is really, really good. And I got kind of excited for it because it's basically a natural disaster mixed with a true crime story. So I present to you, dear listener, the Banqiao Dam. So this one may be better known to folks who are more technological buffs rather than true crime or supernatural buffs because it's discussed more in those circles. To give you an idea of the sort of bullshit we'll be dealing with here, there are 3 time periods that are important to this story, okay? 1951, 1975, and 2005. Now, I will go ahead and tell you outright, just so you know the significance of those dates, okay? In 1951 is where our story technically begins. In 1975, our story really pops off. Like, this would be the big thing. And then in 2005, news of what happened in 1975 is released. Yes, 30 years later. Why, you ask? Well, the answer to that lies in the next sentence of my script. Our story begins in April of 1951 in the Henan province of the People's Republic of China. They were there to solve a problem. So, the Ru River and the Huai River had seen severe flooding in recent years around 1951 leading up there, causing significant problems for people of the province, destroying their homesteads and businesses alike. The solution would hopefully be one that not only prevented flooding in the future, but provide substantial benefits to the people of the countryside and the country as a whole through hydroelectricity. They are going to build a massive dam, hence the title of the episode, the Banqiao Dam.
Aw, damn.
And everything went fine, and that's the end of my topic.
Oh, nice.
No, really. A massive dam was going to provide all this energy. It'll greatly help the country's infrastructure, because as populations are booming and the Industrial Revolution is happening all around the world, like an electricity grid that's nationwide is something that is sort of starting to develop, and people are starting to figure out, we have people that need electricity and we might not have enough electricity to provide to everyone. That's still something we suffer from in the United States in heavily populated areas that have brownouts and things like that. So
it's not just something that happens in your pants.
Wow, that's gross. I don't know what a brownout is in your pants.
I
would imagine it's when you
I know what a blowout
have
is.
such a blowout that everything down there is brown. So, all right. So they're going to develop this dam, and the Chinese government decided when planning the dam that they would enlist the help of another country and their ally, another government, so to speak, and that would be the USSR. So the Soviet consultants came to the Henan province to aid in the planning of the dam and help identify ways to, quote, maximize efficiency.
By maximize efficiency, do you mean save money?
Yes.
Okay.
Now, while that sounds great, anyone who has ever worked with a really shitty boss has probably heard that in a different context. The context I've heard it in before is, we want you to do the most with the least amount of effort on our part. Those are my bosses in the past. In this particular case, though, it's more what Robin talked about, which is the case in some construction project, which is do the most while spending the absolute least amount of money. Where can we cut corners to save money? But hey, there are people that are in charge of making sure that those sorts of things don't scale back the construction project to a dangerous place. After all, the Banqiao Dam was a massive undertaking. They were going to be damming the Ru River, creating a reservoir, really similar to how the Hoover Dam dammed up the Colorado River and created Lake Mead.
Okay.
So, in fact, that's pretty much how most dams work in general, but there is one big difference between the Banqiao Dam and the Hoover Dam, and that is the Hoover Dam is in a desert. Meanwhile, the Banqiao Dam is in an area that is considered subtropical that gets plenty of rain. Exactly. Anyways, there was a hydrologist that specialized in dam construction on the project named Chen Jing. When they began building it, he noticed these quote-unquote cost-saving measures. And he said, yo dogs, and this is the original Chinese, mind you, yo dogs, these decisions to save money are starting to put the project below safety regulations. We probably shouldn't be doing that. So the dogs in question here were the ones in charge of the project, some members of the Chinese government, in fact, and their response to him was, what decisions are you referring to? And Chen Jing told them specifically his concerns were focused on the number of sluice gates attached to the project. So what's a sluice gate? So I think everyone can kind of picture a dam. I think most people picture the Hoover Dam in most cases, if you're from the United States especially. A sluice gate is a gate on a dam that can be opened to let water through in the event that the capacity behind the dam becomes too great. The whole point of a dam is to block off the water and funnel it through turbines, which generate electricity, right? If there's too much water behind it, you're like, uh-oh, this is getting bad. You open a sluice gate, which is basically like, it's not going to go through the turbines. It's just going to flow past the dam, you know?
Is it like those holes in your bathtub and your sink that kind of...
Yeah, that's a really good example, actually. That's a really good example.
It's like I do this for a living.
But it's like that if the hole in your sink to keep it from overflowing had a gate in front of it. And in this case, that gate needed government approval to be opened.
Okay.
So that's what it is. But he's saying, like, I'm concerned about these sluice gates because there's not enough of them. Now, typically when the water rises to a really high point, they just open the sluice gates. You know, there's nothing too big. There's other ways that you can do this, like spillways. The Hoover Dam has a spillway where it just basically, like, lowers the sides of where it channels to the Hoover Dam, and it just, like, spills out and then goes down a different channel. So here's the thing about trying to research a construction project and eventual event that takes place in the country where the government refuses to release any details for a significant amount of time, if at all, is that those details tend to be very difficult to find. Now, I've seen multiple sources that state that the original plans for the Banqiao Dam was to have 18 separate sluice gates. Okay? So Chen raised his concerns because the changes to the project brought the number of sluice gates below 12. 12 was determined to be the minimum amount of sluice gates for the project before the dam became unsafe or unstable.
Okay.
So the powers that be heard Chen's concerns and promptly took action. They said, you're fucking fired. Side note, not an actual quote, but it sure as hell close enough. They removed him from the project entirely. He was no longer a part of it. They did not replace him on the project afterwards. So once Chen was removed, there is no telling the amount of corners that would be cut on the project until its completion, but it would be completed in 1952, a year later. Well, completed in quotes.
Okay.
Work still needed to be done immediately after construction stopped because there was these things that were happening that they thought needed work. In particular, there were these things called cracks appearing.
Oh my God.
Within and around the sluice gates and in other areas of the dam itself. Yes, this is foreshadowing. They actually went back to the Soviet consultants and said, hey, we're having these cracks appear in our dam. What do you recommend we do?
Stick some chewing gum in there.
Whatever advice they gave them, they're like, here's how you can patch it up without having to redo everything. And they followed that. They're just like, okay, cool. So despite being broken literally right after being completed, the Banqiao Dam was nicknamed the Iron Dam.
That is...
upon completion.
That's like calling the Titanic the unsinkable ship.
And
it's
they
just
said...
like such a bad idea.
They named it the Iron Dam, and this is the rest of the sentence, and was said to be, you guessed it, unbreakable. They built this dam that's literally already cracking.
God damn it.
And they decide to name it Unbreakable. People, as a side note, really should just not call anything unbreakable ever. It's just stupid. But aside from the terrible decisions made...
Except for that movie.
The movie was good.
I
loved it when I was a kid. I haven't seen it in a long time. I also haven't seen the other two, Split or Glass. So don't at me. Don't tell me anything about them. I don't want to know. Aside from the terrible decisions made during construction, things went fairly well when the dam was done. The cracks happened. They asked, hey, how do we fix this? Soviets were like, vodka. They're like, okay, cool. Just kidding, but probably. The flooding in the countryside stopped. The dam was providing electricity. Things were actually looking pretty good. It had been called unbreakable, and it hadn't broken right away. So that was a good sign. They're like, whoo, like you could just hear like the collective forehead swipe. And things seemed good for a little over 20 years, around 25 years. But then something happened. And we've heard the part about human stupidity and corruption that's borderline true crime, pretty much true crime. So let's talk about the natural disaster piece of this.
I've heard about the 1975 you said was going to be very important here.
Indeed, that's where we're at. So there are these things called hurricanes, all right, which are these big rotating storms in the ocean. To be specific, a storm that rotates that has an eye in the middle and a minimum sustained wind of 74 miles per hour is considered a Category 1 hurricane.
All right.
I used to want to be a meteorologist, so I know some things about these things, not a ton, but enough where I'm like, okay, that sounds familiar. There's an international date line that runs down the Pacific Ocean, which is why here in Nevada, it's 1:47 a.m. on April 27th, 2021. However, in Japan, which is to our left or west...
Is it a day ahead?
It's 16 hours ahead. So they're technically living in the future. Actually, I think they're still living in the same day as us, which is rare. But they are living in the future of this day.
Which is rare every single day.
No. Usually, like, by the time I look at the clock, it's already the next day in Japan. You know what I mean?
Okay, yeah.
It's just started to roll over. But if you cross that international date line where you're basically, like, in the future, it's no longer called a hurricane. It's called a typhoon. I think there's also tropical cyclone in some areas. There's a lot of variation there. There's actually a few typhoon scales that go by knots or kilometers per hour instead of miles per hour. There's the JMA, the HKO, the CMO. You guys don't care about these things.
All right.
What you care about is the big one. The big one is called the super typhoon. It gets redefined a lot. It's fairly new. They defined the super typhoon in 2009 and 2015. Depending on what scale or where you're at in the timeline, it's equivalent to an either Category 3, Category 4, or Category 5 hurricane. Category 5 being the worst of all hurricanes with a minimum sustained wind of 160 miles per hour, which is awful. In August,
when it's like 40 miles per hour out here, it's like, Jesus.
You can't even imagine like 4 times. It literally rips your house apart, you know? In August of 1975, okay, quick side note, we're having our dogs in the office, both dogs for the first time ever recording, and my feet are currently being licked by one of them, so it's just really weird. Anyways, in August of 1975, Super Typhoon Nina would arrive in the Philippine Sea, heading towards China and picking up strength. And by the time it would make its first landfall, it would have a sustained maximum wind of 160 miles per hour. Which would classify it as a Category 5 hurricane here in the States.
All right.
When I was growing up, in the 90s, a Category 5 hurricane was said to occur once every 100 years. They happened so frequently when I was growing up, they changed that to once every 10 years.
Wow.
Because of how more frequently they're happening, because they are catastrophic hurricanes that basically erase whatever they touch. Something seemingly lucky happened during Super Typhoon Nina's landfall. It actually smacked directly into Taiwan, and it weakened significantly. Taiwan suffered a direct hit, and the results were terrible. But in the short distance between the island of Taiwan and the mainland of China, the storm dropped almost half its wind speed, from a Category 5 to a tropical storm, in fact. So it was sustained winds of 70 miles per hour now, which is more than half of its wind speed gone. Unfortunately, when Super Typhoon Nina did arrive to the mainland, it wasn't the winds that devastated the land. It was the rain. The amount of rain it dumped on the landscape was, for lack of a better term, fuck nuts.
Yeah, boy!
The Henan province, that's Robin's new catchphrase, and I hate it so much, but I decided to include it. The Henan province gets around 36 inches of rain annually at the high end. 36 inches is quite a bit. That's 3 feet. 3 feet of rain a year for this particular area, okay? Super Typhoon Nina dumped 64.2 inches of rain on the province during the 7 days in which it swept in and went away. 33 inches of that was dropped in the span of 6 hours. So basically the entire annual rainfall dropped from the heavens in 6 hours. We made Italian beef on Sunday. It took more than 6 hours to make that. I can't imagine.
You say we. Spooky Mom made Italian beef.
And then I ate some. I can't imagine 3 feet of rain falling in that amount of time. That is insanity. The People's Daily is a newspaper in China, which means it's run by the government and they control everything it says. Among the things that was put forth to hype up the dam when it was first unleashed was its ability to withstand a, quote, once in 1,000 year flood. Basically, this dam is so fucking sweet. It will withstand a flood that is so epic it only happens once a millennia, once every 1,000 years. When speaking of this event, the People's Daily referred to Super Typhoon Nina as a, quote, once in 2,000 year flood.
Basically, so it was even worse.
Basically 25 years after they claimed that that's how long it would take for a flood to show up that would fuck up this dam, they're like, this was like twice as bad as the amount of water we were thinking about before. Who knows what would have happened if the Banqiao Dam would have been built up to specifications. Maybe that structure would have been enough to withstand this, but the decisions made in 1951 and 1952 made damn sure that this version of the Banqiao Dam that did get built was nowhere near enough. On August 6th, 1975, the officials at the dam sent a request to open the dam to prevent failure, but they were denied, specifically due to flooding downstream. Like, there's already pretty bad flooding downstream. If you let all that water through the dam, it's going to get worse. So they're told, no, you can't open it. Don't open the sluice gates. You're not allowed. August 7th, a notification is sent stating, okay, open the dam now so you can prevent dam failure. And that notification is never received. I should mention at this point that the accounts vary on this between people that were actually at the dam and the government details released 30 years later in 2005. This particular part is the government saying, on August 7th, we told them they could, but we guess they never got the message. August 8th, 1975, at 1 a.m., everything went wrong. The dam didn't actually collapse like you see in the movies due to like a crack getting worse and worse and worse and all of a sudden just crumbles away. The water crested the dam. The water had gotten so high, I think they said it was like 385 feet above sea level is how high it had been built, which roughly amounts to like 70 or 80 feet above where the land was when they built it, high up, that the water got so high that it just went over the dam. And once that happened, the structure itself, it just sort of collapsed. And the structure had held up the way it was supposed to. And the worst part was, even if they had opened the sluice gates with the fast rising water, it wouldn't have mattered. It would have just crested later in the night. It was doomed to fail. And at that point, when this dam did fail, in the dead of night, a wave of water 6 miles wide and up to 25 feet high came crashing through the towns and villages that the dam had been built to protect from flooding. The water moved across the countryside at just over 30 miles an hour.
Oh my God.
Thousands upon thousands of people died in this wave of water. The official death toll released in 2005 states that 26,000 people died in the wave. It's widely believed that this number is complete horseshit. The Daowenchang commune held 9,600 people. It had not been notified that the dam was going to fail. They had not been evacuated. It was literally washed away. Not a single survivor.
Wow.
It is gone. Other villages and towns were notified of the dam's impending failure and began to evacuate. The Wenchang commune was not notified. They only lost half of their population of 36,000 people. And between those two communes, that's already 27,600 people. And again, the official death toll was 26,000. So when investigated, that number doesn't hold any water. No pun intended.
So government cover-up?
Complete government cover-up for 30 years. 100% lying through their teeth 30 years later. There were literally hundreds of towns and villages and communes that were hit by this wave of water. And to make all this worse, the Banqiao Dam wasn't the only dam that failed that night. So when this dam burst, all that water went downstream, and it is referred to as a, quote, chain reaction of failures. So if one dam bursts and there's another dam downstream, it's going to get hit with that giant wave of water.
Yeah.
So the term catastrophic failure is something that is referred to for a variety of things. When something is built, it's built to work. When it doesn't work, it suffers a failure. When that failure puts the object in question to the point where it's no longer recoverable, where it's just fucked, that's catastrophic failure. Your car engine could throw a rod. I've had that happen before. On the freeway, I heard something horrible. Every fucking warning light went off.
Wow.
What happened was a rod detached from the piston, got whipped through my engine and destroyed everything.
What? That's
so
horrifying.
I can identify the source, but I also knew catastrophic failure. I need a new engine or I need a new car, and a new car is cheaper than a new engine.
Oh my God.
And that was that. That's how I lost my 2004 Chevy Malibu.
Yeah,
Catastrophic
Chevy Malibu?
failure. Yeah, they're the most plain cars on earth. There's even a commercial of them pulling up a Chevy Malibu. And people get out and run inside and rob the bank. They run outside, they get in the car, and then all the cops show up, and they're like, oh, we're caught. And the cops run past the car. And they just back out and drive away, and they're like, drive a car that gets you noticed.
Oh my God.
That car they used was identical to the car I used to drive. And it threw a rod, hence catastrophic failure. When the Banqiao Dam suffered a catastrophic failure, it was quite literally a catastrophe. Not just in the idea of this thing that was built to work stopped working and won't work anymore. It was a disaster of epic proportions here. Those proportions are debated to this day, but here are the numbers that are given. 62 dams failed that night.
Oh my God.
Just that night, okay?
It's because it just kept going and going and going?
Yeah. And there's other shit that happened. So the amount of water that flooded the land is biblical. Like, literally. It's insane. The Banqiao Dam was built to hold back around, just this one dam was built to hold back around 12% of the total amount of water in Lake Michigan. You've seen Lake Michigan. It's massive. It's the size of a sea. It's like I think it's had like the 10th biggest lake in the world. This one dam was built to hold back 12% of that water that not only all came over, but extra came over because of how bad it was raining, and then proceeded to plow through other dams and other reservoirs out there that held water around the same amount, and 61 others wound up bursting. So in August of 1975, after this whole thing goes down, a death toll is given from the Committee of the Communist Party, and that death toll, which is unofficial but was apparently stated to the party leaders, was 85,600 people died. That's during the month of August, is how much they were saying people died. The numbers never made official. What is made official is the ban on anyone speaking about the event at all.
Wow.
No media sources are allowed to give word. Anyone who worked for those government entities that know what happened aren't allowed to talk about it. And all the people suffering from it aren't allowed to ask for help from fucking anyone. Like, the government's going to try and take care of it one way or another. And I don't know how much I trust that, because there was another dam that was on the verge of bursting on the Suya Lake, S-U-Y-A. That dam still has very little known about it. There's no Wikipedia page. There's no Google results. They just know it exists because of some of the official documents that were released on this.
Okay.
If that dam would have failed, it would have been even more dramatic of an increase to the death toll, which I still haven't gotten to yet, by the way, the official death toll on this. So the chain reaction flooded the Quan River as well, and the Linquan County, when the Quan River started blowing its dikes out, was also completely washed away. When this started happening, in order to prevent the dam from bursting at the Suya Lake, the Chinese government carried out airstrikes on several dams to burst them to flood the land just to make sure that the bigger dam wouldn't break.
So they wanted to spread more water outward.
They're like, if this water gets to the Suya Lake, more people are going to die. So they're like, these other dams might not burst, but it's going to channel into the Suya Lake. So they're like, I guess fuck the countryside, folks. And they blew the fucking dams.
Wow.
And they flooded the land because in the end, they're like, the other thing we can do is let it hit Suya Lake. And then when that dam bursts, even more people are going to die. So it's estimated that 5,960,000 buildings collapsed due to the flooding that night. 11 million residents were affected and displaced by the flooding. The death toll between the flooding and the disease that followed due to famine, infections, and epidemics was cited by Discovery at 240,000 people.
Discovery, like, channel?
Yes.
Oh my God.
250,000 people died from this. Side note, the bombing of Hiroshima killed 146,000 people. The bombing of Nagasaki killed 80,000 people. Those two atomic bombs that were used during wartime, the only two to ever be used during wartime, killed 226,000 people total. That's not even as many as died during this flood. There was 14,000 more people that died in this flood because the dam burst because it was built like shit and it caused catastrophic failure that just chain reacted through this valley and just kept washing these people away.
You're saying the project was damned from the start?
I hate you so much. It's a good thing they saved all that money in 1951, though, I guess. I saw estimates of like $2 billion of property damage destroyed from 1975. I didn't even check the conversion rate on that, but it's a fucking lot. So the Discovery Channel ran a program in 2005 after these official documents were released, and that program was called the Ultimate 10 Technological Disasters of the World. The Banqiao Dam failure was ranked as the #1 worst technological disaster in human history, just ahead of Chernobyl.
Oh my God.
They're like, this is even worse. Like, 250,000 people died over something that people knew was wrong. And when they went in there and they're like, we need to rebuild all these dams. We need to figure out how to unflood the fucking lands and figure out what we're going to do to basically make this habitable again. You know who they went and found? Chen Xing. Like, hey, dude, 20 years ago who told us this was going to happen. How do we fix this? And they put him in charge of it. Like, you're in charge of cleaning up the fucking mess now, by the way.
That's
Sorry
nuts.
we didn't listen to you 25 years ago. But that's who they wound up picking to basically be in charge of the project to clean the whole goddamn thing up. So it was just a disaster, literally of epic proportions. This is the third deadliest flood in human history. #1 and #2 also came from China. They also came from flooding and resulted in dam and dike failures. And I will cover those eventually. However, a little spoiler, the #1 flood in human history resulted in an estimate of 4 million people dead.
What the French toast?
I found that
dude.
right at the end of this when I was like, 250,000 people. I can't even imagine that many people. And then it's like, it pales in comparison to the 2 floods above it.
Oh my God.
And I was like, this is unfucking believable. So I felt I would share this one with you because it is definitely an indictment on the greed of human beings. It's like a failure of human engineering caused by human greed and a natural disaster of epic proportions combined to wipe off 240,000 people from the face of the earth. And it's horrific to think about. So that, my spooky friends, is the Banqiao Dam failure.
Nice.
Well, not really.
I mean, it's not nice, but like, that's very informative.
Informative topic of horrific events.
Now we're gonna get into the commercial break here, and you guys will hear about more horrific events on the other side. Welcome to my half of the episode. This week, my topic is I think it's a pretty big one. It's one that I've heard about in passing before, but haven't actually gotten to deep dive into. And that is the murder of Kitty Genovese.
Right.
So, Catherine Susan Kitty Genovese was born July 7th, 1935 in Brooklyn, New York. 1935 is, almost 90 years ago, right?
Yeah, 80-something years ago.
Yeah.
I'm too tired to do math right now.
I know, me too. She was the eldest of 5 children, raised Catholic. She grew up in a neighborhood that was mostly filled with families of Italian and Irish heritage.
86. Oh my God, it finally came to me.
So her being an Italian American, she fit right into the area. As a teenager, she attended an all-girls school where people recalled her as being, quote-unquote, self-assured beyond her years with a sunny disposition. Something that I'm sure not many people are said to be. God knows I'm a goddamn mess and I'm over 30. So wow. For someone in high school to have people like, she's just confident. She knows her shit. You know what I mean? In 1954, her family was forced to move, choosing New Canaan, Connecticut, after her mother actually witnessed a murder.
Wow.
So her mom witnessed a murder. Her entire family moves to Connecticut. She, on the other hand, decides to stay in Brooklyn with her grandparents as she, I guess, is getting ready to get married. And she actually does get married, but gets her marriage annulled towards the end of 1954. Wow. So, yeah, so.
Pretty interesting life so far.
Yeah.
Were they relocated because of like relocation or witness relocation program? Or was it like, I saw someone get killed and I'm getting the fudge out of here?
I wonder if it's like a witness relocation thing where they're just like, we can't stay in Brooklyn where we can't, right. Where we need to go. She moves into an apartment in Brooklyn at 8270 Austin Street while working some clerical jobs. She didn't actually love these jobs that she was doing. I think she was at one point working for an insurance company. She just did not like it. So she starts.
So take that, insurance agents out there.
So by the late 1950s, she starts bartending. She would rather bartend than do that.
Clerical work.
Yeah. August 1961 sees her arrested for bookmaking. She was a bookie, so she was taking bets for horse races from her bar patrons. So she gets arrested for that. Her and her friend Dee were both fined $50 for doing that.
Woo! Steep fines. I'm sure that was a lot back then.
Yeah, $50 in 1960. That's a lot. I mean,
yeah, let me put it into my Google brain really fast. That comes out to like $4.8 billion.
Shut up, you're so stupid.
I think it's probably going to come out to something like $500 or $600.
Yeah, maybe not that high, but something around there. It's like not something you'd want to lose, you know. But she ends up losing her job on top of that. She moves on to a different bartending job at Ev's 11th Hour Bar in Hollis, Queens. She soon starts managing the bar because the owner's like an absentee, never there. So she becomes the manager for the bar, works double shifts, tries to save up a bunch of money because her goal is to open up an Italian restaurant.
Nice.
So she's just saving all this money.
A magical Italian eatery.
What is that from?
It's that old lady who reviewed Olive Garden. And she loved it.
Yeah. She met Mary Ann Zelenko in 1963 and ends up sharing her apartment with her. On March 13th, 1964, at about 2:30 a.m., Kitty leaves the bar after her shift and begins her drive home. What she doesn't know is at the time, there's someone who's watching her on her drive.
That's so creepy.
So, Winston Mosley was in his parked car around Hoover Avenue when she caught his eye. And Kitty gets home around 3:15 a.m., parks her car in the apartment complex parking lot, which is approximately 100 feet from her front door. It just happens to be, though, in an alleyway at the rear of her building. So, as she's walking back to her apartment, Mosley's following her, armed with a hunting knife. This guy obviously was prepared. He knew what he wanted to do. If you are holding a knife like that, following someone from that distance, you know what I mean? That's creepy.
You have one intention. It's very clear at that point.
Kitty obviously caught on to him, started running towards the building. He, of course, runs after her. He proceeds to stab her in the back twice, at which Kitty screams out loud, "Oh my God, he stabbed me, help me." She's literally screaming this in the apartment complex parking lot. And she's almost to her door, right? The apartment building door. Apparently, several neighbors heard her cry, but only a few of them heard what sounded like a cry for help. So they heard a noise, didn't know exactly what that noise was. Only a couple of them heard that it was somebody that needed help. One of her neighbors, Robert Moser, even shouted at the attacker, "Let that girl alone." So he yelled out,
"That'll get it done."
Yep.
Go on, get.
Mosley then runs off. Kitty slowly makes her way to the back entrance of the building. She, of course, is seriously injured. She's been stabbed twice, but was at this point, once she goes around the back of the building, out of view of any witnesses. According to witnesses, they see Mosley enter his car, drive away, and then return a mere 10 minutes later. This time, he has a wide-brimmed hat on, systematically searching the parking lot, the train station, and the apartment complex, eventually finding his target.
Wow.
So he gets back. Kitty's lying in a hallway at the back of the building, barely conscious. There was a locked door that prevented her from getting inside the building, apparently. Out of view of any witnesses and anyone that had heard or seen the initial attack, Mosley continues to stab her several more times.
Oh my God.
He rapes her and steals $49 off of her before he runs away again. So not only does he murder this person, he's like, you got $49, I'm going to take this. He
rapes and robs them as well.
Yeah, it's like crazy. These attacks span over approximately half an hour. So all this happens over half an hour. There's evidence of defensive wounds on her hands, so she tried to defend herself against it. A neighbor and friend, Sophia Farrar, found her shortly after the second attack, holding her until the ambulance arrives. It was originally thought that no one lifted a finger to call the police or do anything about the attack, when in actuality what happened is that records of the earliest calls to police are not really clear or were not really given a high priority when they called in. Interesting fact, this is actually 4 years before New York City implemented the 911 emergency call system. So it didn't even exist yet. One witness said that his father called the police after the initial attack and reported that a woman was, quote, beat up, but got up and was staggering around, end quote. So if police hear that, it's like, okay, it's not a murder or anything. Police don't have to get sent there right this second.
Plus, it's like 1950s police. They're like, oh, well, we don't care.
I don't know how bad the neighborhood was or anything, but I'm sure that had something to play into the whole thing, too. Another witness, Carl Ross, a few minutes afterwards, called 2 friends for advice on what to do. One of them called another one, who then called the police. So it was like a game of phone tag to figure out who's going to call the police.
It's like a third-hand account at this point.
Right. And so after this call, police arrive within minutes.
I do this thing where if I hear a weird noise, I immediately check the time, and then I say out loud what has happened. I do this a lot, actually. Right. I'll be like...
Yeah, dogs will start barking outside, and it's like, he creates these stories like, yeah, it started happening around, like, X amount of time,
well, officer, at 11:15 at fucking night, these dogs started barking like someone was getting murdered. And then I'm like, I wonder how long until I decide to actually call the cops. Because it's just one of those things that runs through my mind, especially doing a show like we do, is like, how often am I hearing something that is a signal that something actually bad is happening?
Right.
Know?
All right. Continuing on, the ambulance arrives at around 4:15 a.m. and Kitty Genovese dies while on the way to the hospital. Police then looked into questioning her girlfriend Marianne, who she had met the year before. She was questioned that morning at 7 a.m. for 6 hours. So what happened was 4 o'clock, they go to their apartment, tell her, hey, she died. And so at 7 a.m., they go back to get her. She's been drinking with their neighbor, Carl Ross. So the both of them are like drinking because this just happened. You know what I mean? So Marianne's considered to be a suspect for murder. They also arrest Carl Ross for being really intrusive and suspicious because her body was found lying at the bottom of the stairs that lead to his apartment.
Huh.
So that happens. 6 days after the incident, Winston Mosley is arrested for a suspected robbery in Ozone Park, Queens. A TV set is found in the trunk of his white Chevy Corvair. They discover this during a search of the vehicle after a local named Raoul Cleary is suspicious of Mosley because he watched him take this TV from a neighbor's house. He calls the police And it's like, what the fuck?
No, nothing to see here. TV removery man.
No, yeah, this guy's super sketch. He says that he's a mover, but then they talk to the neighbors. The neighbors like, we're not moving. A detective recalls that a white car had been reported by some witnesses to Kitty's murder. So they connect this white car this guy has to the white car of this murder. This went along the chain, like this detective tells the other detectives, and it just becomes this thing. So they bring in Mosley for questioning about this murder. During this bout of questioning, Mosley confesses to her murder, as well as the murder of 2 other women. Annie Mae Johnson, who had been shot and burned to death in her apartment a few weeks earlier, and a 15-year-old Barbara Kralik, who had been killed the previous July. Mosley lived in Ozone Park, Queens. He was 29 at the time of the murder. He was married with 3 kids. No criminal record.
Just running around stealing shit and killing people out of nowhere.
I guess so. He has no criminal record. I don't know how that happens. When he confesses to killing Kitty, he's able to detail the attack and was able to corroborate the physical evidence that they found at the scene. His reasoning behind his attack was, quote, to kill a woman because they were easier and didn't fight back.
So he just wanted to kill someone, and he picked women because he thought that they were easier and wouldn't fight back.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yep. According to his statement, he woke up around 2 a.m. He left his wife and kids sleeping at home and drove through Queens in hopes of finding a victim. He simply spots Kitty on her way home and follows her and kills her. During his confession, he confessed to the other 2 murders as well as 30 to 40 burglaries. How he gets away with that without any criminal record is mind-boggling.
So TV removery man worked like 29 previous times.
Apparently so. And it's just nuts. Do they have fingerprint evidence yet?
I don't know.
I don't know when that's invented or discovered. Apparently, during his psych evaluations, it's suggested that Mosley was a necrophiliac, which is gross.
Gross as fuck.
Though he was charged with the murder of Kitty Genovese, he was not charged with the other 2 murders. That being because another man named Alvin Mitchell had also confessed to the murder of Barbara Kralik. Mosley's trial begins June 8th, 1964, 3 months after the murder. I don't know how fast murder trials usually take, is it?
Yeah. At least in contemporary times.
Okay. Mosley initially pleads not guilty, but his lawyer later changes it to a plea of not guilty by reason of insanity. I don't know if being a necrophiliac makes you insane, but that's what they did.
I wonder if that detail got brought up to the lawyer and they're like, oh, I can use that. Maybe. I can use that to prove that you're crazy.
The jury deliberated for 7 hours before coming back with a verdict of guilty on June 11th at 10:30 p.m. On June 15th, he's sentenced to death for the murder of Kitty Genovese. He shows no emotion at his sentencing, even though there were cheers and applause from people at the sentencing. On June 23rd, Mosley appears as a defense witness in the trial of Alvin Mitchell. For the murder of Barbara, he was granted immunity from prosecution and testified to the act of killing her.
So basically, the prosecution was like, if you admit to killing this person and testify in the defense of someone else we're prosecuting, we won't hold you accountable for the act of... So there's no justice for this woman at all.
He's already in jail. He's already... You know what I mean? Despite this testimony, in a second trial, Mitchell was found guilty. So it doesn't matter that he was there. It's just like that guy was found guilty anyway. It really makes you wonder which one the truth is, though, because what if that guy didn't actually kill? You know what I mean? I really want to know who it was. And with a lot of cases like this, I always want to know who was the actual person who did it. On June 1st, 1967, 3 years later, New York Court of Appeals found that Mosley should have been able to argue for his mental insanity during his sentencing hearing. So because of this, his sentence is reduced to life imprisonment instead of, death penalty type stuff. March 18th, 1968, during that year, he escapes prison during a transport from a hospital in Buffalo, New York. Apparently, he went there for minor surgery for a self-inflicted injury.
So he planned that shit.
Exactly! I'm like, he totally freaking planned this escape. He hits the correctional officer, steals his weapon, flees to a vacant house nearby. He stays hidden for 3 days. And then the owners of the house come to check on the house. He holds them hostage for more than an hour. He gags the husband, rapes his wife, and steals their car.
Jesus Christ.
This guy is a freaking monster. March 22nd, he breaks into another home, holds a woman and her daughter hostage for 2 hours, but leaves them unharmed, thankfully.
Wow.
He soon surrenders himself to police. I don't know. I'm sure he was like, there's nothing I can do. I mean, I could keep doing this, but it's not life. You know what I mean? So once he turns himself in, he's charged with escape and kidnapping, to which he pleads guilty. After this escape, he's sentenced to 2 additional 15-year sentences served concurrently with his life sentence.
Just in case he comes back to life after dying of old age.
Oh, does that happen?
I don't know. Babe, I don't think someone has come back to life after dying from old age in the past.
So there was some point in time, and I'm not exactly sure at what point, but he said a mobster executed Kitty, and he was only the getaway driver. Mosley's son stated that he believed his father attacked her because she yelled racist slurs at him. During the 70s, this guy gets his Bachelor of Arts in Sociology. He becomes eligible for parole in 1984. During this parole hearing, he claims to have never intended to kill her. He considered her murder a mugging.
But he also raped her.
Because, quote, people do kill people when they mug them sometimes, end quote.
Solid defense.
Right? The board obviously denies his request for parole. I would too. That sentence just proves he didn't learn anything.
He broke out and raped another chick and didn't even get charged for that. He got charged for, kidnapping and escaping and not the rape of another woman. And he's just like, people die sometimes when you mug them. Shit happens. Please let me out.
Yeah, it's nuts. This guy's a monster. He had another parole hearing, 2008, still showing little remorse for what he did. Denied. 2015, another parole hearing, another denial. He dies in prison March 28th, 2016, at the age of 81.
Wow.
He serves 52 years, one of the longest sentences served in the New York State prison system. He's in there for a really long time. And the only way out is death. There wasn't a lot of media attention in the days following Kitty's murder. The New York City Police Commissioner had to talk to the New York Times Metropolitan editor at the time and say, quote, that Queen story is one for the books, end quote, in order to motivate the media to actually do something. So after this meeting, the media decides to publish reports on the incident. An article by Martin Gansberg was published on March 27th, 1964, 2 weeks after the murder. In this article, he claims 38 people witnessed the murder, which is funny because the article is titled 38 or 37 people witness, you know what I mean? But it included a quote from an unidentified neighbor claiming they didn't want to get involved. And that turns out to be Carl Ross, the guy that was like, I'm going to call.
He didn't want to get involved, but then he drank with the neighbor.
Well, he's the guy that called a friend whose friend called the police. So this story brought up an issue of callousness or apathy of life in big cities like New York. There are now those that consider this article that was put out to be an over-exaggeration of the incident. In a 2004 article published by the New York Times by Jim Rassenberger, published on the 40th anniversary of the murder. These original accusations in that article are questioned. So the New York Times is like, hold on, we need to publish an edit on that article that was written way back in the day. 2007 study found that there weren't actually 38 witnesses or that anyone witnessed and remained ignorant to it. No one witnessed the attack in its entirety because she was in one place and then she went around and those witnesses that saw her in the beginning couldn't see her anymore. So they don't even know what happened on the other end. So it's like, there were people that weren't aware of anything happening at all. So they were like, this article makes no sense. It's just an over-exaggeration, really. Though even after all this stuff came out, this research, these articles, things like that, reactions of neighborhood murders seem to stay the same. In a New York Times article from December 28th, 1974, 10 years after the murder of Kitty Genovese, a 25-year-old Sandra Zoller was beaten to death Christmas morning in an apartment within a building that overlooked that of the Genovese murder.
Wow.
Though neighbors heard screams and quote-unquote fierce struggles, they did nothing. So that's why it's such a big deal that there's just so much apathy and so much like, I don't want to get involved, you know? This one's such a big deal. This murder is such a big deal because it started getting people to look into what is now known to be the bystander effect, or Genovese syndrome, and it's really terrifying. It's a major player in U.S. psychology books in the past. There are some that relate this to male or female power relations, like people don't get involved if they think that it's just a man beating his wife or his girlfriend. They don't want to get involved in that. There are some social psychologists that believe that when there are larger numbers of bystanders, there's a decrease in the likelihood that someone will actually stand out from the group and step forward to help.
So they just assume someone else is going to do it.
And so if onlookers see that other people aren't helping, they won't help either.
That's so fucked up, man.
Isn't it? It's just crazy. And that's why it's such a big deal that this is a thing, especially in big cities and big groups of people.
It's like that whole thing where they teach you to yell fire instead of rape if you're the victim of rape, because people won't come and help you. If you yell fire, they might come and try and help.
Because it's a fire.
Because a fire is different. And it's just like that sort of psychological conditioning for human beings is like one of the most depressing and disgusting things of all time.
Kitty was buried on March 16th, 1964 in Lakeview Cemetery in New Canaan, Connecticut. So she ends up going back to where her family moved to. Her murder is one of the crimes credited in pushing for the creation of the 911 emergency call system. It became the national emergency number in 1968, so 4 years after her murder. There is a Netflix documentary called The Witness, which involves her brother William exploring her death, if you folks want to check that out on Netflix, because I know so many people in the world have Netflix. If you don't have Netflix, your friend has Netflix, and you should grab their password.
And Netflix has a million crime documentaries at this point, which is Netflix, kind of the golden age.
If you want to sponsor us, that'd be great.
I'm sure we could write a script for Netflix, and they could go and just give us the money to do the interviews. So,
so that is the murder of Kitty Genovese.
That's really crazy, man. That's super, super depressing. When you mentioned the fact that they said, like, the apathy towards life in a big city, like, that definitely seems like the framing of an article that's been written around a premise that's already kind of fluffed up, you know, to sell copies. But, like, just the idea that bystanders don't do anything is definitely real, though. It's like people just decide they're not going to help.
You know what people like doing? They like rubbernecking. They just want to check and see what's going on.
And they like gossiping.
Yes, but they don't want to do anything about it. They don't actually want to get involved with what's going on. They just want to know what's going on.
As a person who has far too often put myself between two people when I probably shouldn't
when they're fighting?
It's just like, I have gotten more shit from people for standing between two people than for not. Like, if I've had a situation where I'm like, I'm not going to get involved, I have never once been told, like, that was the wrong thing to do. But trying to calm a situation down or help, whether or not I was successful or not successful,
you just like, you should just let them
I've been
alone.
told by countless people, like, just, it's not your business, like, mind your own business. And it's not like, hey, you did the right thing, because, like, the best example I can give you is, I saw a couple arguing at a bowling alley one time, and this guy was screaming at his girlfriend, like, nose to nose with her in his face. And everyone in the group I was with was like, just ignore it. They were literally ignoring that it was happening. And me and only one friend were like, if he touches her, we're going to beat the shit out of that dude. We like looked at each other. I was like, are you ready? He's like, yep. And everyone else was sitting there 100% committed to, we're not going to do a fucking thing. No matter what happens, we're not going to do a thing. We're going to act like we didn't see anything. And if anyone asks us, we're going to say we didn't see anything.
That's fucked up.
Yeah.
And that's part of that thing where it's like, oh, if a guy's just messing with his own wife or his own girlfriend, just leave it be. That's their business. It's fucked up, and I don't think that's right.
There's a big line between sticking your nose in someone else's business and doing the right thing.
Yeah.
Like, there's a huge, huge area between those two where it's like, everyone tries to pretend that it's just like overlaps completely. So it's like, as long as I'm only ever focused on myself and I only ever care about myself, I'm never doing the wrong thing, you know? And I think that's sort of what that article was painted around.
Mm-hmm.
Just the idea of, it's just like, you know, when I hear dogs barking, they're fucking dogs, you know? I'm not going to call and get someone's dog in trouble at 11:30 at night for barking. But when it comes to a point where it's like, I don't know if what I heard now is related to a crime or something going on, then you eventually wind up having a decision of, do I get involved, you know? It's like when we hear fucking fireworks going off late at night. It's like, was that a firework or was that a gunshot? Probably a firework. I hope it was a firework. And it's like when I lived in a bad neighborhood and I used to hear gunshots, I would hear them so often, I didn't even bother calling the police.
I've only had a gunshot, like, next door once. And
it was a murder.
And it was a murder. Oh my God. But yeah, so thank you everybody who's gotten this far in the episode.
That was fascinating.
Hopefully you folks found both these topics fascinating. One engineeringly interesting, the other true crime interesting.
Indeed.
But yeah, I don't know what we usually say right now.
Usually you just stop and you let me take it over.
Okay.
So yeah, that's everything that we have for you for this episode. If you would like to share a story, whether it's supernatural, true crime, paranormal, coincidental, or spiritual in nature, feel free to email us. Our email address is storytime@scaryish.com. If you have a creepypasta, which is a short fictional story that you really enjoy that's horror related, you can email pastatime@scaryish.com and say, hey, I would love it if you guys cover this, because we do cover those on Pasta Time episodes where we go through and we read fictional horror stories, which has been really, really fun. And we've also been getting personal short stories that our spooky friends have written sent to us, which has been fantastic. If you have a short story you would like to send us, just say, hey, this is so-and-so, this is fictional, send it to pastatime@scaryish.com, and let us know if we're allowed to read it. Because we have had a couple get sent to us over time where it's been like, I wrote this, it's not for the show, I just want you guys to read it, it's 100% fictional, and we appreciate those a lot too. So it's been kind of a fun thing for people to go ahead and send in stuff that they've worked on or that they really appreciate in the fiction genre too. So those are the best ways to reach out to us via email. You can hit us up on our social medias. We have Facebook, which is facebook.com/scarishpodcast. Twitter is @scarishpod, and Instagram is @scarishpodcast. Or our website, scaryish.com, and you can click on contact us, fill out that form, and it comes directly to us. Robin, if folks would like to donate to us, how can they do so?
You can go to patreon.com/scaryish-podcast. Tiers start at $1. I hope you understood what I just said just now.
I think I said here's, but...
yeah, tiers start at $1. At $1, you get ad-free episodes, and tiers kind of go up from there. And there's even like a physical merch tier. I am going to send out the next little sticker that I have here soon. And yeah. And coffee. If you don't like the monthly tier stuff, you can go to ko-fi.com/scaryish-podcast. Those are one-time donations. All your donations go to upgrading our studio setup, kind of help us keep going, stay motivated, and get us a step closer to making this our real jobs.
God, wouldn't that be nice?
That would be so nice.
It really would be. But thank you so much to everyone who listens, supports us, rates, and reviews us. You mean the world to us, so thank you one more time. And that's everything we have for episode 176. So, Robin, why don't you go ahead and sign us out?
Keep on creeping on, and we'll talk to you guys later.
Bye.